Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with another video about the Michigan Wolverines for the 2024 season. This time we're going to be talking about the defensive line group, and specifically we're going to spend a lot of time on the starting four defensive linemen, mainly because I don't believe there's a better group of starting defensive linemen in the country. And the first of those starters that we're going to be talking about is Derek Moore, who is a 6'3" to 4. He's probably somewhere in that range, around 255-pound defensive end. He fits best as a traditional 4-3 defensive end, although he has shown the ability to play in a stand-up edge rusher position. And I believe he also has upside if you wanted to kick him inside on passing downs. Now, Michigan does not need him to do that, as they have the best two defensive tackles in the country. However, from an NFL perspective, I do think he has upside and potential in that role. He appears to have quality edge rusher arm length. It's not elite or anything. However, I do believe he will check off that box when he goes to the NFL Combine, either after this year or the following year. He is a player that quite legitimately has first-round traits and athleticism. He just needs the opportunity and the production to be able to get into that conversation. This is one of the biggest sleepers in terms of potential first-round picks in all of college football this season. And I also wholeheartedly believe he will get the opportunity to have that level of production this year, as 11 sacks from the edge rusher position left for the NFL this past season. It's also worth noting, I do not believe that Michigan will have the same rotation along the defensive line as a whole as they did last year. There is a much bigger drop-off from the starting unit to the backup unit in this year's team than there was in last year's team. And that is, generally speaking, across this roster, a theme. And unlike last year, where we could suffer two injuries along the offensive line and see basically no drop off in the level of play or production, or potentially lose even two or three more players along the defensive line and not really lose any production either. That is just not the case for this team. There is a lot of unproven players on the two deep for this year's roster. And because of that, and also because of the new defensive coordinator, who just isn't a fan of rotating as much as our previous defensive coordinator was, I believe that these players, these starting four players, Derek Moore included, are going to play maybe twice as many snaps as the starters on last year's team did. So I fervently believe that Derek Moore will have the opportunity to show that level of play that will get him talked about in the first round, because we saw it in flashes this past season. If he can step up and be consistent, I believe this is someone who will be talked about going in the first round in the NFL draft. The player I believe will start opposite of Derek Moore is going to be Josiah Stewart, who is a big-time pass rushing talent. And if you go back to his film at Coastal Carolina, you see it more so than you do this past season at Michigan. However, I think he had to adjust, especially earlier on in the season, to the level of talent that he was playing every week, as well as the fact that he couldn't just out-quick players around the edge anymore. However, that being said, he did show a variety of pass rush moves and even some counter moves at the next level, as well as eliciting a good amount of pop still. However, the size is likely going to keep him from getting drafted, certainly on day one, but probably also on day 2. Would it surprise me if he snuck into the tail end of the 3rd round? No. But the fact of the matter is, being 6'1" to 6'2" and 245 pounds, even though 245 is a decent weight for the position he's likely going to play at the next level, the size and the length concerns are likely going to keep him out of legitimately being in that day 2 conversation. Now, could a team fall in love with him and they decide to take him in that range? Yes, absolutely. However, this is very likely, in my opinion, not an every down player at the next level. He's a rotational player, a scheme dependent player as well. He has nowhere to play in a 4-3 defense. And even in some schemes of a 3-4 where you're going to be asking your edge rushers to actually drop into coverage and play in space a little bit more, he's also probably not going to fit very well in those style of scheme as well. For the same reason that I believe Derek Moore will eventually get into the first round conversation as an edge rusher, is also the same reason why I don't think Josiah Stewart is likely going to get drafted as high as potentially his play would suggest that he should go. And that's because the vast majority of NFL teams are traits and talent over production style of drafters. That's why you see players like Ezekiel Ansah and Brian Burns and Montez Sweat go in the first round, as opposed to smaller players like fellow Michigan legend Josh Uche, or in terms of a super high-end player, Elvis Dumervil, who was actually, I believe, not even 6 foot. I think he was 5'11" and like 260 pounds, and was a tremendous football player in the NFL. I don't think Josiah Stewart has the Elvis Dumervil upside, but I do believe he is someone who, in the right scheme and given the right opportunity, will turn into a productive NFL pass rusher. Now, as we pivot to the interior of this defensive line starting group, we're going to be talking about players that have both the production, like Josiah Stewart has, and the physical tools that will hit all of the benchmarks and check off all the boxes that NFL teams will want them to check off, like Derek Moore will. Because Kenneth Grant checks every box that you want him to check. Dude is 6'3", listed at around 340 pounds. He is big. He is fast. He has quality arm length for the position. Not as important on the interior as it is on the edge, but generally speaking, longer arms, always prefer them. This is the textbook example of what a first round nose tackle looks like in the NFL. He is a fantastic run defender, like truly a dominant run defender, and has, honestly, I went back and looked at it for this video, a shocking amount of polish in the pass rush game. He was a way better pass rusher than people gave him credit for. Usually when you talk about the interior pass rushers for Michigan, you're talking about Mason Graham, and I do think Mason Graham is a better pass rusher than Kenneth Grant, but that is a conversation. Kenneth Grant had 5.5 sacks last year and a good amount of pressures as well. This is what a first round nose tackle, if you're going to take one in the first round, has to look like. He is in that Jordan Davis, Dexter Lawrence, and Vita Vea mold of nose tackles that you just know are going to be really, really good in the NFL. And his partner in crime, Mason Graham, is, in all honesty, my number one player in the 2025 draft, at least heading into the season. It's likely him or Pierce, the edge rusher from Tennessee, and because of the way that I value things, and because of the way that I grade players, and also because it's a widely accepted truth in the NFL that interior pass rush is more valuable than exterior pass rush because it is rarer to find, I don't particularly believe there's a whole lot that Pierce can do to surpass Mason Graham, unless Mason Graham just takes like a massive step backwards that I don't think he's going to do. However, when it comes to him as a player, he has advanced hands, he has fantastic quickness and brilliant power moves, if I'm just being honest with you. He's the whole package as a defensive lineman and specifically a three technique. I also think he has the size and anchor to play the nose tackle position if he wants to. So you can get another three technique on the field that can rush the passer without having to worry about the run game, because Mason Graham, I think, can play head up on a center or as a shade on the shoulder in the one tech and still be a productive pass rusher and a high caliber run stopper. I haven't finalized a grade for him, and I would really, really have to think about it, but he is up there for maybe potentially being the best interior defensive lineman that I've scouted. I mean, I believe Quinnen Williams and Jalen Carter are my two top three techniques of all time, and I was tremendously high on both of those players, but I'm not sure if he's there quite yet. I would have to really dive deeper into the film and see how he plays this year, but he is certainly in that conversation, and I think probably worst case scenario, he's still going to end up being a top 5 3 technique that I've ever scouted before. Now, looking past the starting 4, which I genuinely believe are the best unit in college football at the defensive line position, we have the depth pieces, which I don't have a whole lot of confidence in. Basically, the only depth piece or rotation piece returning from this past season is Rayshon Benny on the left side of your screen, number 26, which is an odd number from our defensive lineman, but I don't really care that much. And I do believe that he's a quality player that will be able to rotate along the interior of that defensive line without much of a drop-off. He's not as good as Kenneth Grant. He's not as good as Mason Graham, but he is a quality football player, even at the higher ends of the Power 5. I think if he were to transfer to perhaps like a middle-of-the-pack Power 5 team like Arizona or something like that, then I think he would probably start fairly easily. However, he's not there. He's at Michigan, so he's coming off of the bench. But he's a quality player, and I actually like his upside quite a bit as a rotation player. In the middle, we have Etta Snow, who, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what position he plays, because he is listed at 6'5", 295 pounds. However, he's also listed as an edge rusher and was recruited as someone who's going to come off the edge. Now, maybe at 6'5", 295, he can come off the edge. That would be a extraordinarily rare breed of player, but maybe that's just the caliber of player that he is. He might be that guy. However, I think it's far more likely that he's someone who is in the midst of getting up to like 305, 310, kind of in the same mold as a Chris Jenkins, where he came in as an edge guy at like 260 and had to put on 40 to 45 pounds of weight in order to move into the interior. And Chris Jenkins hovered right around 290, 295 until his senior year, where he finally put on that extra 10, 15 pounds, where he got up to where he was playing north of 300. That, I believe, is the case with Etta Snow. I think he's likely going to be an interior player. I just don't know if I feel comfortable rotating him in there as a 3 technique at 295 pounds. Maybe he's strong enough to anchor down and it'll be fine, but generally speaking, that's a little bit light for the position, and even though he is tall, I don't particularly think he has a whole lot of length for the position, which might be the reason why they're asking him to move inside. So there's just a lot of question marks surrounding Etta Snow. The other guy on the screen right now, all the way on the right, is TJ Guy, who got a lot of run in garbage time last year coming off the edge and was actually kind of productive in doing it. I believe that he will be the first true edge rusher to come off the bench in the rotation this year. Now, I believe he is a fourth year player, so it is maybe a little bit concerning that he hasn't been able to crack the rotation until this year. However, he was also behind three edge rushers that were either in his class or older than him that were, at least in my opinion, genuine NFL type of players. And then also Derek Moore, who came in as a top 50 recruit. And in all honesty, if he hadn't committed to Michigan, I think he probably would have been a 5-star who jumped ahead of him from behind. So there is a little bit of leeway with why he hasn't been able to crack the edge rush rotation. However, this is also someone that heading into last year, the coaching staff did talk about as a guy that really, really improved from 2 years ago to last year. So I ultimately believe he will be the edge rusher that is in the rotation day one. As far as who's going to fill out that rotation, I don't really know. I don't have a whole lot of opinions on pretty much any of these players, other than I think it's interesting that Cameron Brandt and Trey Pierce were not redshirted this past year. I don't know if they ended up playing 4 games or not, but they are both listed as true sophomores. So that could mean that they were valuable enough to be put on the travel squad this past year, and that they wanted them to get some garbage time reps because they were going to be part of the rotation this year. That might be the case. That's a very reasonable explanation, but I'm not sure I buy into that. I think that there's a definitive possibility that they just liked these guys a lot as young players and decided to play them in all of their garbage time games because they wanted them to get reps and weren't necessarily believing that they were going to step up and be rotation caliber pieces this year. Another player that I want to highlight is Dominic Nichols, a true freshman edge rusher that the coaching staff has just been raving about. Specifically, I think it was Wink Martindale that was talking about how good this kid is. There are other players here. Breon Ishmael is a redshirt freshman that they have also listed as someone to watch on the edge. Keyshawn Bennett is an older guy that could crack the rotation this year, and Ike Owana is another older guy that could find himself in the rotation, but I don't know enough about those players to truly stand out and say, oh yeah, these are the oldie players, they've been in the system longer, so they're going to be the ones that get the nod in the rotation. I just don't know enough about them to make that statement definitively. But in this group here, you're really only looking for 1 or 2 players to step up and be that rotational quality player. And as far as that goes, I do probably think that it will be one of Cameron Brandt or Trey Pierce that end up taking that step. However, there are 2 guys that I am more confident in being part of the rotation as interior guys, that being Rayshon Benny and Etta Snow, that Trey Pierce might not be able to crack the rotation unless somebody gets hurt. However, there is an edge rusher position in the 2 deep that I believe is open and up for grabs right now. So that's where you could see someone like Cameron Brandt come into play, even in bigger games as a rotational player. So this is likely what the depth chart is going to look like, in my opinion. Starting at the quote-unquote edge position, we have Josiah Stewart. Nose tackle or 1 technique, we have Kenneth Grant. D tackle or 3 tech, we have Mason Graham. And at the defensive end position, we have Derek Moore. with TJ Guy backing up Josiah Stewart as the backup edge rusher, Rayshon Benny backing up Kenneth Grant as the nose tackle, Etta Snow backing up Mason Graham as the 3 technique, and one of Cameron Brandt or Dominic Nichols, just because he's been talked about quite a bit by the coaching staff as a true freshman that's come in and been like a guy to watch going forward. He could end up cracking the rotation. So I decided to put either him or Cameron Brandt as sort of the 2 guys most likely to be that final edge rusher piece, in my opinion. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. And it's at this point that I would like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.